Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Thoughts. I'm Carolina and I'm here with Rev Dog.
It is. We're in the middle of Passion Week. It's a Tuesday of Passion Week. Maundy Thursday's coming up, and we're taking time to discuss something that we hope you'll find interesting.
And we're back in our studio today.
Isn't that nice?
It's been a while.
Sure has. Yep.
So, earlier you told me you wanted to talk about authentic faith.
Correct.
And in the past, we have talked about faith, but why authentic?
Authentic faith. Because authentic faith refers to something that is our own personal faith, not just something kind of out there that other people do that we've heard about, but something that we personally have experienced. So the word authentic, I'm looking up at our blackboard here. The root word of it is auto, which like an automobile. It drives itself, you might say. Of course, the person's behind the steering wheel, but there's not a horse in front of it pulling it. It is self-propelled. And that to have our own faith is generated from within us, not by something out there or people out there. And I think that's really important to develop our own personal faith. I think it's important because it's so much more enriching.
Yes.
Did I ever tell you the story about Professor Agassiz from Harvard?
No.
Because this goes back 150 years ago, anyhow, maybe more. Professor Agassiz was a zoologist, in other words, study of animals and so forth. And he had this practice with his newest students when they would arrive at Harvard and they would begin their biology classes and so forth. He would give them a fish, take a fish out of, that stuff that would preserve it, alcohol or formaldehyde or whatever. And he would say, look at this fish, observe it, and I'll come back a little bit later and tell me about it. All the students would come and they'd say, yeah, it's a fish, it's green, it has scales, and he'd come back 15 minutes later and say, tell me about the fish. And they'd tell him a few things. He says, study it some more. He'd come back an hour later and he would arrive and they would say, well, I don't really know what to be looking for. Tell me, what should I be looking for? He says, you haven't figured it out yet. Take the fish in the jar, study it overnight, and I'll ask you tomorrow. Well, he'd come back tomorrow and ask them. And what would often happen is they would say, I never really knew or saw a fish until I had to look at it myself and come up with my own conclusions about this fish. Because in 1 minute, I can tell you about the fish based on what other people have told me about fish. But I'm observing this particular individual fish, and I'm seeing that maybe this fish suffered an injury at some time. Maybe this fish had this or that happen to it. And they would see things that you wouldn't see if all you're basing your observation of the fish on is what somebody told you about fish. You had to learn it and experience for yourself. And Professor Agassiz discovered that if he could get his zoology students at Harvard to actually really look at things themselves and experience it themselves, they would become such better zoologists than if all they did was take what they learned and say, that's the conclusion of the matter. And many of his former students would write about how Professor Agassiz opened their eyes to the animal world, but also opened their eyes to a whole new way of experiencing life. Personally, observation, it's your own experience, not someone else's or a book's. And faith is the same way. When you experience it yourself and have to go through the difficulty of understanding it on your own without somebody telling it to you, it's so much more enriching. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this today, because I think people really miss out on what faith can really be, because they think it's simply a matter of doing what somebody else told you to do, or watching somebody else doing it, but not experiencing it themselves. And I think that's something that we really need to try to work on in our churches these days.
To put things into context, can you maybe tell us a story about authentic faith?
Okay, so I didn't have Professor Agassiz. I had a different professor in seminary, and it was my second year of seminary. And the second year of seminary is when you learn how to preach. The first year you're studying all these different doctrines and theories, and the second year you continue that even into the third. But the second year is when they start to teach you how to actually speak. So it's my first course, and the first thing they had all of us do is the assignment was to stand up in front of the class and tell the class about your own experience of faith and how you came to the Lord and what the Lord means to you and so forth. So I really prepared well, and I came and I talked all about the example of my grandmother. What a wonderful faith she had, and I'd look at her and just admire her faith and so forth. And I finished my little 5-6 minute speech, and the professor said, "You really crafted that story well. Your speech was so clear." And then she said, "But one problem. You didn't talk about your own faith. You talked about your grandmother's. That wasn't the assignment. And how are you ever going to preach in front of people in a church if you don't have your own faith?" And I want to tell you, when you're confronted like that, you're like, oh, like a slap in the face. And she was absolutely right. And from that point on, I realized I had better start to devise and come and understand my own faith. Go back to Professor Agassiz's laboratory and start to really look at my own faith, because if it's not my own faith, it just doesn't come off authentically, and it just doesn't connect with people who I think are starving for their own authentic faith rather than living someone else's. And so that story, that was like one of those things that I was shown how wrong I was, and I was smart enough to correct it. It's like they say, there's not smoking indoors anymore. Smokers can't smoke indoors because no one wants to breathe their secondhand smoke, right?
Yeah.
If, for goodness sake, if church is simply me not smoking but speaking, and everybody just lives off my secondhand kind of thing, they're not developing their own faith. And so I learned the hard way that I had to do that. And so if people in our church here or other churches hear me say this, do not hear me criticizing you. Hear me commiserating with you, because I did it myself, and I didn't even know it until it was pointed out to me. You don't have your own faith, Doug. And that was a critical moment for me.
Yeah. We shouldn't also compare our journey, our faith with others.
Of course, because they're all different. As I spoke to you earlier, your marriage with Andrea and my marriage with Gail have similarities, I'm sure, but there are a lot of differences because you and he are different, and Gail and I are different. We're at different points in life and all this kind of stuff, so it takes on a very different dynamic. I can't live your marriage, and you can't live mine. We have to live our own and make our own way with it. And so it's so much better when we live our own lives.
And we build our own relationship with God.
There you go.
It's personal. So then, what prevents authentic faith?
I think the one thing that prevents authentic faith is timidity. People are afraid. One of the things that a philosopher named Martin Heidegger said, in order to become authentic, you must become resolute. By resolute, he means you have to actually be yourself and be willing to be yourself and assert yourself in the world rather than timidly holding back and being afraid. So I was thinking about what an example might be. So now, one of the first times I asked Gail to do something with me, this goes way back, we were college students. It was a Sunday afternoon, and nobody studies or does anything on Sunday afternoon, and so I noticed in the TV guide, they used to have TV guides, little magazine-like things, that there was a rerun of the Beverly Hillbillies show. And I'm thinking, well, maybe Gail would be willing to watch Beverly Hillbillies with me. Maybe that's something she'd be, because we really hadn't started dating yet. It was kind of breaking the ice and so forth. And I went over to her dormitory, and when I asked her down from her room, they had the little desk there, they called her down. I was so terrified. I mean, everything. My mouth went dry, my heart was pounding, my palms were sweating. And I didn't say to her, "Would you like to watch Beverly Hillbillies with me?" I said, and I had the TV guy, Beverly Hillbillies. She looked at me and said, "Are you asking if I want to watch Beverly Hillbillies with you?" Yeah. And the interesting thing about that, I was so clumsy, I was so awkward, but I was just myself. There was nothing more than just me, this college student wanting to form a relationship with this girl, and I had enough boldness to do it, but I did it so badly. Almost to this day, you ever heard the expression, "you had me at hello"? She would say, "You had me at ba 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 ba." So in other words, you had me when you were authentically yourself. Yeah. If I had come and I had said, as Shakespeare once wrote, "What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and gale is the sun." Shakespeare said that. She would have been, so Shakespeare said that, so what does that have to do with you and me? I was authentic. I didn't use Shakespeare. I didn't use anything other than myself. And I had her at ba 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 ba. See, we're timid. We don't actually willing to have our own faith, and certainly for most people to talk about our own faith. But it is that authentic, even if we're stuttering and stumbling through, but it's genuine and we're risking. Remember I said without risk, faith is impossible? Yes. How can you have authentic faith if you're not willing to risk? It's got to be yours. So I was resolute. And now next month it'll be 42 years of marriage. And that episode I told you about was from about 45 years ago. So and it all started with stuttering and stumbling, and it developed from there. And that was authentic. Yes. You know what I'm saying? And that's what really matters. And if we can have our own authentic faith and just appreciate each other's authenticity without criticizing or anything like that, or saying, "Well, you didn't say that right." I mean, she didn't say that to me. For her, her heart melted when she saw my vulnerable, timid, but still somewhat assertive authenticity. I think people could do that.
We're always afraid of being judged.
Oh, yeah.
And when we are in a community, a church, or we get afraid to being judged the way we act or behave or the way we express our faith. We're afraid, oh, maybe this person is going to judge me. Maybe that's not the right way. Mm-hmm. So this is why we need to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah, and as we say, whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey of faith, you are welcome here. Do we really live that? And do we really play that out? Come whoever you are and wherever you are on your journey, and stutter and stumble through this with the rest of us who are stuttering and stumbling through this. But it's ours. It's not our parents or my grandmother's. It's not my faith. As the pastor, which people often do, they identify way too much with the pastor. They need to develop their own faith. I think we'd be better off.
What can help us develop authentic faith?
I think, first of all, we need to understand that it's a necessary part of the faith life. You could read in the Bible at least 4 or 5 or 6 places that, something to the effect, we will all give an account of ourselves before God. Are we rehearsing in advance? What kind of account are we going to give to God about our own life? And can we rehearse and practice together? Why not? And so we first of all need to understand the importance of that. Second of all, I think what would really be helpful is for us to maybe do an annual examination, spiritual examination. I have an annual medical physical every year. Most of us go to the dentist a couple times and get our teeth cleaned, and they take x-rays. For all of us, don't we all go and get our oil changed in our cars, and we maintain our cars? Why are we so lax about our own faith? I wonder if we were required to give an account of ourselves, even if it's just a small, select group of people on a regular basis, and we say, this is what's happened to me in the last year. I've changed a few of my ideas about God, and my relationship with God's changed a little bit in the last year in these ways, because this is what happened to me. I think that would be helpful. I think that would develop authentic faith, because we'd take this seriously and we'd be on this ongoing journey. I also think, I just lost my thought. That's a product of old age. And then I also think, here's what I was going to say. We also need to take a look back and say, these are the experiences I've had that confirmed my faith. It didn't change me, it made it stronger. So for example, with me, I could say, one of the things that I've learned at Greendale People's Church that has confirmed my understanding of this need for authentic faith is, the interesting thing about the word Greendale People's Church, people is plural. You're not a people, you're a person.
Yeah.
We together are a people. And if all we see our faith as people, plural, church, and we never develop person kind of faith, then I think we're really missing out on what we could be. And I got to tell you, most of the people out there who are on spiritual journeys, who are not going to church, are looking more for a personal experience rather than what people group can I plug into to do what they are doing. How can I develop and grow in my faith? And that's something that's been confirmed in me, and I realize it's an important thing for me to try to present and promote. Understanding that we live in a free country and people don't have to listen to a word I say or follow anything I do, and I'm okay with that. Understanding that people have their own personal faith, and just because I'm saying this something is important doesn't mean they have to see it as equally important as I do. But I do think I have the responsibility to present my own personal perspective on faith and to encourage people to consider what I'm saying and incorporate it or alter it, schmooze it a little bit or whatever, so that we go from Greendale People's Church, plural, to Greendale Person Church, where people develop their own personal faith in addition to experiencing this social group we call the people.
Yes, I think what is happening to my generation is that many of us, we really don't feel like we want to follow certain rules and traditions, but we want to explore our own personal relationship with God. And when we talk about going to church, we get lost there, because then we feel like, no, I have to do the same stuff that everybody does at that church. And that's why they really don't, I'm not going back.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to invite them to come in and stutter and stumble with us.
Yes.
And if they see all of us stumbling and stuttering with expressing our own faith, so much the better. I stand up in front of people and have been doing so for a long time. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm pretty good at it. But the truth is, there are many times I stumble and stutter as well. It doesn't come out the way I wished it would have, or it wasn't as clear as I wish it would have been. But it's got to be authentic. And I think your generation is the generation of authenticity. If it's not authentic, why bother? Yeah. And so come and stumble with us and stutter. We'll love your authenticity if we can accept our own stumbling and stuttering. You know what I'm saying?
That too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're too hard with ourselves.
Yes.
We're very accepting of everybody else but us.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to express your own faith.
Yep. You have me at ba 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 ba.
Okay, thank you so much for another wonderful conversation, Rev. And to all of you, thank you for watching. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and follow.
Okay, bye now.